If you think that The Hateful Eight is just another brutal Quentin Tarantino movie with lots of blood, typical dialogue, and post-irony, you're wrong. Many people miss the point of this movie, even though it seemed pretty obvious to me. I've watched a lot of videos, and guess what? None of them gave me a sufficient answer to the question, what was Tarantino really trying to tell us?
So bright, you got to wonder why nobody never thought about it before.
In this video, I'll tackle the most important moments of the movie, explaining why the movie is called The Hateful Eight, aside from the obvious fact that there are 8 main characters. We'll also talk about the reason why Minnie wouldn't let the Mexicans into her place.
No dogs or Mexicans allowed.
How the final scene reveals the meaning of the entire movie.
Now that was a nice thing.
And of course, talk about the very letter from Lincoln. Perhaps this is one of the most important details that explains the meaning of the movie.
I still got what?
The Lincoln letter.
Of course.
First, let's briefly recollect the plot of the movie. Remembering all the moments and plot twists is important for understanding the movie. The movie is set in the snowy mountains of Wyoming, where bounty hunter John Ruth, nicknamed the Hangman, is taking his captive Daisy Domergue to be executed. Along the way, he meets another bounty hunter, Major Marquis Warren.
Name's Major Marcus Warren, former U.S. Cavalry.
And Sheriff Chris Mannix.
Is that you, Chris Mannix?
I'm sorry, friend, do we know each other?
The 4 of them take shelter from an impending blizzard in Minnie's haberdashery, and several mysterious individuals are already there. Mexican Bob, who claims that the owner is away.
I'm Bob!
Executioner Oswaldo Mowbray.
Oswaldo Mowbray, madam.
Cowboy Joe Gage.
What?
That's my name, Joe Gage.
And an old general.
Hello, old-timer. General.
The true motives of each character are gradually revealed in a tense atmosphere saturated with mistrust. It quickly becomes clear that no one here is an accidental guest.
Everybody, get your backsides up against that back wall over yonder.
The 4 people in Minnie's haberdashery turn out to be members of the Domergue gang who have come to free the captive Daisy.
Now one of y'all is working with her.
Moreover, the brother of the condemned woman was in the basement the whole time.
Now, with your hands where we can see them.
As a result, a boring trip of bounty hunters ends in a bloodbath in which almost everyone dies. The movie culminates in a bloody denouement where the survivors, the bleeding major, and the sheriff decide to carry out Daisy's sentence themselves.
You only need to hang mean bastards, but mean bastards you need to hang.
And finally, they read the letter from Lincoln.
Can I see that Lincoln letter?
I think it's obvious to everyone that the title, The Hateful Eight, implies that there are 8 main characters in the movie, and that this is Quentin Tarantino's 8th movie. But the situation with the title is actually more interesting than it seems. In 1960, the movie The Magnificent Seven was released, which became a classic of the genre as a Western. In the plot, poor peasants suffering from constant raids and extortions of the gang decide to find defenders for their settlement. Chris and 6 other mercenaries respond to their request and unite to fight the robbers. Despite the significant advantage of the gangsters, they succeed. In The Hateful Eight, Quentin Tarantino decided to deconstruct this classic plot. Deconstruction is when a familiar concept that has already become stereotypical is taken apart and then reassembled into something else that can no longer be called a stereotype. As a result, we see familiar ideas from a new, unexpected side. That's what Tarantino did. In The Magnificent Seven, events unfold under the hot Mexican sun. Tarantino shows a cold, snowy Wyoming, while classic westerns usually take place under the open sky in endless hilly plains. Tarantino decided to put his characters in a confined space, Minnie's haberdashery. In The Magnificent Seven, the characters are waiting for gangsters in the settlement to protect the inhabitants. In The Hateful Eight, the gangsters have already visited the haberdashery and have already massacred its inhabitants. In the Magnificent Seven, there are 7 noble heroes fighting for justice. In the Hateful Eight, we encounter 8 disgusting, deceitful, and greedy characters who are guided mainly with a thirst to make money. And the gang leader himself is here to nobly save his sister from death.
How you doing, dummy?
Better. Now I see your ugly face.
So, the title of the movie is actually a play on words. There's a Magnificent Seven, and here is a Hateful Eight. Tarantino deliberately destroys everything we used to expect from Westerns, giving us not a heroic story, but a violent, confusing, and dark drama. By the way, he deconstructs not only the genre of the Western, but also the genre of crime films, with which he combines the Western. In the classic crime movie, there is one criminal hiding among the characters, but here there are 4 of them at once. To understand the meaning of the Hateful Eight, it's important to consider not only the events of the movie, but also the historical context. You may have noticed that words like Southerners or Confederates often appear in dialogues.
Confederates took exception to my capacity for killing them.
If you're not familiar with the American Civil War, you may not understand some important points. So let's refresh your memory a bit about the essence of this conflict. The American Civil War is one of the bloodiest and most significant events in American history. It erupted in 1861 between the northern states, known as the Union, and the southern states, which had united into a confederacy. The main cause of the conflict was the issue of slavery. The North supported its abolition, while the southern states insisted on keeping the slave system because their economy depended on the labor of slaves on plantations. But, of course, this conflict was not just about slavery. There were also issues of power, economic influence, and cultural differences involved. The North was more industrialized, progressive, and wealthy, but the South remained agrarian, traditional, and dependent on slave labor. This was a real rift in the country that reached a boiling point when the southern states declared their secession from the Union and proclaimed the creation of a separate state. The events of the Hateful Eight unfold against this backdrop. Now that we have refreshed our memory of the plot of the movie and its historical context, let's move on to discussing its meaning. What is the Hateful Eight really about, and why does Lincoln's letter matter?
Old Mary Todd's calling, so I guess it must be time for bed. Old Mary Todd.
Oswaldo Mowbray gives the key to understanding the movie when he divides the haberdashery shop into 2 parts.
May I suggest a possible solution? We divide Minnie's in half. The northern side and the southern side.
The adherents of the Confederacy are in one part, and the adherents of the northern states and the Union are in the other part.
With the dinner table operating as a neutral territory. We could say that the fireplace side of the room acts as a symbolic representative of Georgia, while the bar represents Philadelphia.
General Sandy Smithers, as well as Sheriff Mannix, vividly expresses their commitment to Southern ideals.
Major Nigger, General Smithers wishes me to inform you.
I heard him, hillbilly.
And Major Marquis Warren, who served on the side of the North, had a personal animosity and hatred for the Southerners. This turns the building into a miniature version of a state divided into 2 camps, each of them fiercely claiming that they were the right one and that it was their actions that were fair and just. But a closer look reveals that's all a lie.
You're a goddamn lie.
A lie is what unites everyone in this room. The magnificent gang of 4 initially lies, hiding their true intentions, but the others also aren't as honest as they might seem at first glance. For example, it turns out that Major Marquis Warren, who fought for the freedom of black people, actually killed his people.
When Major Marquess burned 47 men alive for no more reason than to give a nigger a run for the trees.
And it looks like he actually just liked doing it.
I do believe they accused you of being a kill-crazy nigga who only joined the war to kill white.
General Sandy Smithers, an ardent hater of black people, suddenly allows Warren to sit next to him.
So, how's life since the war?
I can't complain.
Although just recently he refused to eat near him.
We didn't have the time or the food.
nor the inclination to care for northern horses, and least of all, northern niggers!
Sheriff Mannix, who shows respect and deference to General.
Can I get you some coffee?
That'd be nice.
Well, how about a blanket?
That'd be even nicer.
Hell, you know what? You can have mine. There we go, General.
But right after killing him, he takes his warm clothes away as if there was no respect.
Captain Chris Mannix donned the dead general's coat and joined Oswaldo in lighting the candles and lanterns.
He also claims he hates black people.
Cause when niggers are scared, that's when white folks are safe.
But once Warren has a gun and their goals align, that hatred suddenly vanishes.
Please let me send this ugly son of a bitch to hell.
John Ruth doesn't care what side he's on at all. He just follows what's profitable.
As long as the bar is Philadelphia, I agree.
And of course, we can't ignore Minnie, who manifests racism.
Now, Minnie hung that sign up the day she opened this haberdashery.
She hates Mexicans and thought dogs were more worthy creatures.
You know why she took it down? She started letting in dogs.
The movie deliberately tells us this story first, and only then, at the end, does it reveal that Minnie herself is black.
Hey, Minnie!
That is a black woman who was a racist herself. In fact, the situation may have been true. After the Civil War, many African Americans tried to find jobs and settle in regions where their rights were at least formally protected. Mexicans, as natives of neighboring Mexico, also looked for work in the same agricultural and construction industries as African Americans. White employers often emphasized ethnic differences by dividing workforces according to nationality or race. This fueled conflicts between groups over access to jobs and resources. It's interesting that when Bob the Mexican arrives at Minnie's haberdashery, she forgets about her hostility to Mexicans for some reason.
Bob.
This is another example of how lies and duplicity infiltrate everything that happens in this movie. Thus, there is a lie lurking beneath the surface of each character. The lies unite these people not only within the confines of a single room, but also at the level of the entire society and state. But if everything around is a lie, then what is the truth? The truth is in the true intentions of the characters. It's not some lofty ideals.
Your respect would have meant the world to him.
It's about profit, the savage lust for violence, and the constant adaptation to the situation for the sake of immediate gain. These characters are willing to instantly betray their beliefs and values if it will bring them even the slightest advantage in the moment. The final scene emphasizes this point especially vividly.
I say shooting's too good for her.
We see Major Warren and Sheriff Mannix, black and white, who recently expressed absolute hatred for each other, unite in a single impulse to execute the woman themselves.
I sentence you, Domagoo, to hang by the neck until death!
Hang on, Daisy! I want to watch.
They do it in the way that John Ruth, famous for his executions by hanging, savored so sadistically. This act becomes not only justice, but a brutal enjoyment of violence that is satisfying not because of principles, but only because of the opportunity to unleash their cruelty.
Now that was a nice dance.
That sure was pretty.
How can we not think of Oswaldo's words, who reflected on the fine line between justice and lynching?
However, if the relatives and the loved ones of the person you murdered were outside that door right now, and after busting down that door, they drug you out into the snow and hung you up by the neck, that would be frontier justice.
He emphasized that the same actions can be perceived very differently depending on how they are presented. If certain formalities are observed, even the most controversial actions can look quite legitimate. For example, look at the episode with General Smithers. You can't just kill someone in a direct confrontation. That would be a blatant violation of the law. But if you put a gun next to them and tell them a provocative and totally false story that compels them to act...
You knew my boy?
Did I know him? Yep.
the situation changes. Not everything turns into self-defense. And formally, it looks like a legitimate action. But the true reason remains the same, the desire to get what they want through violence. But the most ironic scene takes place in the finale, when the sheriff asks the major for that letter from Lincoln.
Can I see that Lincoln letter?
A letter that the major had earlier recognized as fictitious and as false as everything else around him.
But ain't nobody in Minnie's haberdashery ever corresponded with Abraham Lincoln. Least of all, that nigger there.
And surprisingly, the sheriff reads it with obvious delight and awe.
We still have a long way to go.
And even gives the major a compliment for such a great story.
Oh, Mary Todd, that's a nice touch.
Yeah.
It clearly shows that people like beautiful and inspiring narratives and heartwarming stories more than uncomfortable reality. The history of the vast majority of nations, from the conquests of the Spanish Empire, making Spanish one of the world's most spoken languages today, to the colonization of Africa, is steeped in blood and violence. But history is written by the winners. So, when you open a history book, a beautiful and convenient tale of Abraham Lincoln and old Mary Todd awaits you.
Old Mary Todd's calling, so I guess it must be time for bed. Respectfully, Abraham Lincoln.
The Hateful Eight is not just another typical Tarantino movie, full of blood, violence, and brilliant dialogue. It is a deep and dark story about lies, manipulation, duplicity, double standards, and how people caught in a confined space reveal their true sides, far from being heroic. The movie raises questions about the nature of lies and truth, and about how easy it is to replace it with beautiful but false stories. However, we remain honest with you, so please subscribe to the channel and watch our previous and future videos, because we are sure that our content will not go unnoticed. Thank you for watching this video. Please like it, and let's continue discussing the movie and the director in the comments.